Welcome back. Welcome to the first episode of Season 3 of the Woke Mommy Chatter podcast. It's been a minute, but we're back, and I'm really excited to bring you Season 3. Also, look out for the Woke Mommy Chatter Patreon feed. You'll be hearing more about that soon. Every once in a while, there are people that you meet that really inspire you and leave a mark on your outlook, on your life. And today I'm speaking to one of them, Charline Grant. Charline is a superhero. She is my superhero. I know she's a superhero for a lot of people. Last year, she was called the N-word by a school trustee. That trustee, Nancy Algie, refused to resign and then tried to use dementia as an excuse for her use of the N-word. Charline fought the school board to get that trustee removed. And then she did something amazing. She turned around and ran for school trustee herself. She didn't win, but she ran. On this episode, I talked to Charline about her story, and she shares some of the truths that she's learned as a Black mother with kids in the public education system over the years. This episode is long, but take the time to listen to it all. There's also use of the N-word, which I've left unedited, so take care if you've got kids around. Joining.
No problem. Just good.
I first heard of you last year, I think it was now, when there was a news item about a school trustee who had called a mom the N-word and was refusing to apologize. And that's kind of like how you came onto my radar. So can you tell me a little bit about like your story and how you became Charline Grant, mom of 3, who's running for school board trustee? How did that happen?
Wow. So initially how I became on like this person, my son was having issues at his high school, just started grade 9. And right out the start, he kept coming home with various things that were being said to him by his French teacher. He was part of a special pilot project French program at a high school. And so he was having issues. And, we kept having various meetings to find out what the problem is, what's happening, what's going on. So the meetings that we were having, we realized we weren't getting anywhere. Like it was just roadblocks and excuses and being made and we weren't getting any answers. So we scheduled a meeting with the superintendent of the board. And it was that meeting. This was after about another 3 meetings that we've already had, or 4, with the principal, the teacher, trying to figure out what's happening. And in that meeting, the superintendent met with the administrative staff an hour before he met with us. When we walked in, he didn't even ask us anything really. Right off the bat, he said, "I believe the administrators, and this is how it's going to go. If we believe your son has slight behavioral issues and X, Y, and Z." And at that point was the first time we've ever heard anything about his behavior. It was always, he's very respectful. So we were taken aback by that. So we asked for examples. The examples were so frivolous, and it just seemed like it was this reach. So then he told us, if you're not happy here, we're not going to allow you to transfer into another French school. You could either stay here or take him in the English program. So we left. I picked up my purse and I left. And I said, because on my drive home, this is when it all changed for me. My son we actually told him to wait for us after school. And on our drive home, I said to him, he with tears in his eyes, he said to me, "Mom, it's never going to change. It's always going to be this way." And me choking back tears, I said, "No, I'm going to get you justice." And it's like when your child go outside and they hurt themselves and you say, "Don't worry, I'll fix it. Mom could fix anything." It's what you say. I had no idea what that justice would be or how I would even go about it. But I came home and I started researching, and my mind was blown when I stumbled upon a report from the Ontario Human Rights with the Toronto District School Board, and I started
Mm-hmm.
seeing how deep the systemic racism was in the school, or is in the school. And I did not sleep. I cried that entire night. And I started Googling racism in York Region, and I stumbled upon an article that happened in York Region. And that's how my story started. I reached out to the Star because they had covered that story. And by me calling the Star to ask, do you normally cover school stories? They told me they've already had 12 other parents who are having problems in York Region. So they wanted to meet with me. So in that happened, where I got to where the trustee called me the N-word was we my first time at the board. I went to a meeting that was supposed to take place on a Tuesday night. We heard that there's a superintendent who had written a letter to the Star out in what's going on in the board. So we heard that letter was going to be addressed. Never been there, had no clue what we were getting into. We went to the board. When my husband and I got to the board, there was a reporter there from CTV with his camera guy, just the four of us sitting in the gallery, while the board staff was there. So after we were done, the meeting ended, we all walked out, and on my way to the bathroom, the reporter said, do you mind commenting on what was done here today? I actually said no initially. And my husband goes, yeah, just say something. It doesn't have to be anything, whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. So in that moment, as I was speaking to that reporter, I noticed some of the trustees walked out a side door and then they went back in. It was that moment as I was speaking, the trustee made a comment, is that the N parent speaking to the media again.
Was
So
it on camera?
it wasn't on camera. It was behind closed door, and another superintendent heard her say it and
Okay.
immediately reported it to the director of education, as well as the chair for the trustee, who I'm actually running against. And then they opened an investigation. I wasn't told about it till about 2-3 weeks later, which was because they were doing an investigation. They spoke to her. She admitted to say it, but then there was excuses that was being made as to why she said it. It's not how she meant it. So they opened an investigation to investigate a confession. And I didn't even, to be honest, when another trustee told me about it, told me about it, I actually thought she was being political and she just wanted me to get on side with her. I actually believe that it happened when I heard Selwyn Peters talking about it on Facebook, on his live Facebook feed chat, that this happened in York Region. So I didn't really believe it happened, to be honest, when I initially heard it.
Wow.
And it just opened another can of worm. I mean, it just took on another leg of its own. But for us, it was whenever subtle racism happen or microaggression, it's up to the victim to prove that these things happen. We know. We go through it every day. We know when we're being treated differently. But by her saying it, and saying it, as I always said, amongst her friends, she was comfortable in saying that. It just proved exactly what we were complaining about, and exactly what my little 14-year-old hero was going through.
You said a couple things that really touched me at the top of this call. And the first thing you talked about were the frivolous nature of the complaints against your son. And my son is 8, and I feel like I spent all last year dealing with those kind of frivolous complaints.
Yes.
So because for people who don't understand what these issues are, and we don't as Black people always talk or share it. So what are those issues? Like what were you hearing from the school?
So because you mentioned your 8-year-old, because I also have an 8-year-old who was in grade 3. My story with my oldest at the time didn't start in high school. It started from he was in grade 2. It's funny because after all this happened, I went back and I looked at all the emails I've written to principal, vice principal, teachers, how many times I was there trying to fight and advocate for him. So he been telling us since grade 2 that he's been treated differently at school. He says it. He goes, Mom, they don't like me. As soon as anything happened, they say it. The first time he said it, I cried and I hugged him. I'm like, no, what are you talking about? Don't say this. I was young parent, my firstborn, not understanding the system. In high school, and I've always said this, the way elementary school went for him and how much we talk about the problem at our dinner table and everything that happened. And every time we discuss it with our oldest or the other two were around, he knew how to handle himself in high school. When I asked that superintendent to give me example of his slight behavioral problems, it's because that was the first time I heard it. I had email from the principal and the teachers telling me how great and wonderful he was. So when I heard that, I knew it was a reach. I knew it was false, and I knew they were trying to build a case, and I was not going to have it. So when I said, give me example, the superintendent turned to the principal and said, go. The principal, who I've met on many occasions, held his head down, didn't even look at my husband and I for at least 10 seconds. Could be longer, but it could have seemed like a long pause. And we just kept staring at him because he was uncomfortable about what he was about to say, because he knew that we know he wasn't telling the truth. First thing he said, I was in your son's basketball class, and this coach asked him to put away the ball, and he shot the ball 3 additional times before he put it away. I didn't rebuttal. I said, give me another example, because I knew what I wanted to say, but I wanted to hear what else they had. Then he turned to the vice principal and said, you go. So I realized this was all rehearsed prior to me getting into this meeting. The vice principal said, I went to his class once and his teacher said he went to the bathroom and he took 15 minutes. I said, anything else? They said, well, his teacher sometimes says when they're talking to him, he doesn't always respond. I said, anything else? Because I've never heard any of this. Out of all the phone calls and emails I've sent, I've never heard. So I said to the principal, I said, Mr. Fernando, we've had many meetings. You've told me how respectful Ziphian is. You've never brought this to my attention. My husband coaches basketball as a volunteer. I don't know one basketball player that you tell them put away the ball and they would put it away on the first goal. And if that means that he has behavioral problem, then we have serious issues here. I said, not only that, you mentioned him and that basketball coach. My son is in grade 9 and he's the captain of the basketball team because the coach recognizes leadership quality and how he's able to rally the other players. So you're saying this is the same person? And everybody was quiet. So when I say they were frivolous, I mean, that was in that meeting that we're talking about when they brought this up. There were so many other things that they would say to him. For example, his teacher is the same teacher who we had kept complaining and kept calling him out and kept picking on him. In my view, harassing him the entire season. One of her first interaction with him, she said, I know you're athletic because she thought he was in her class for phys ed, French phys ed. We know you're talented, but we don't need you to showcase your talent here. I wrote the school about that. I said, if he was a math whiz, would the teacher be telling him to tone down his skills and not showcase it in the class? We even went as far and she said, the reason why I said that is because instead of him always winning, why don't he just help the others who are not as good as him? When we said, I said, if maybe, give her, whatever, maybe you should coach, whatever. When he started coaching, then she complained that he wasn't participating enough. So the bars kept moving.
But that's the thing, like I love what you just said about the bar kept moving. And that is the thing for Black students is the bar keeps moving. And a lot of these frivolous complaints, you flip it and put a white child there, or you talk to white parents and they're like, well, my kid does what? Like my kid never listens, or my kid, you know what I mean? So there is this double standard. And it's so disheartening to hear. And I know because I'm going through it that it starts so young, right? And the response from the school board. And then the other thing that you said is that you went online and you had your woke moment where you did some
Yeah.
research. And I always say, I always say that anyone, if you do the research and you understand how Black children are oppressed in the education system, your response is what everyone should have. Like, you can't sleep
Yes.
because it is
Yes.
so disturbing. Like, we have this
Yes.
idea in Canada that, this kind of systemic oppression and racism doesn't exist here, and it's an American problem. And that is the biggest fallacy. It's
Yes.
like the biggest, uh, I guess, trick to the Canadian public, because it's a lie. And we have a problem here. And when you go online, I think I know the report that you're talking, there's that report. And then there's one that was done by York University. I think it was Dr. Carl James.
Carl James.
Oh my God. When you look and read that report, it hurts your soul to know, like, just,
If it doesn't hurt it,
there's a
if you're
problem.
not human, if you're not, when you read that or anything like that, and you read it, because these things it's there for public, but it's not made public, if you
Yes.
understand what I mean.
Yeah.
And based on how the school board treated me, I knew I wasn't alone. And I remember saying to my husband, before I found the article about the incident that happened in Keswick when the Black child on the school bus was kicked and beaten by a white student yelling the word nigger, nigger to him. Before I found that, I remember saying to my husband, there are people like me. And if it's the last thing I do before the day I die, I'm going to put an article, because I was going to put an ad in the paper asking, have you ever suffered racism in the York Region District School Board? That was where I was headed until I found that article. And it just so I found the article, I connected with the reporter that wrote that article, and that's how my article came out. And when I was asked to be the face of it, I became the face of it because other parents were shy, scared, afraid
They're
of the
scared
backlash.
of repercussions, right?
My friends told me this. My good friends I've known for over 20 something years I grew up with said to me, Charlene, are you sure you want to do this? They're going to come after you and your child. And I said to them, I know where you're coming from. Because my friends, the funny thing is they have older kids. We never even talk about this. When I started saying, they go, yeah, our kids went through it. I'm like, you guys never told me this? And I remember saying to them, I don't have a choice, because if I don't, this will forever be his life. And this is not going to be his life. I said, they don't have to like us. And I always say that they don't have to like us, but they're going to respect my child.
100%.
And and when I said, I have to do this. And I'm not only doing it. And I remember I sat my little boy, 14-year-old down, and I would never forget the moment. I said, Ziff, I'm going to ask you a big favor. I know it's a huge ask. I know human being is perfect. But if I go after the board, it's not going to be easy for you, because you're in the lion's den. That's where I'm leaving you, because you're at that school. There might be reprisal. They might go after you. I know it's a lot to ask of a boy, but I want you to be near perfect. Please think of your little brother. He's 6. I need to do this for him and all those other boys, those Black boys who their parents, because what struck me with the report I read, and it hurts my heart, it says when they're in poor neighborhoods, they get it worse. And the parents who are from Somalia, Ethiopia, I read this because their parents, English is not their first language. And where they live, they even had, it's like if there's such thing as a 3-edged sword, that's what they have against them going in. They're Black, they're from poor neighborhoods, and their parents don't speak English. So they don't have a voice.
They're voiceless. Yeah. You did it for them. You did it for my son too, right? Like for my kids, because I feel, and you're right. I think you touched on something that is so important, and that is the fact that we do not, as Black people, there's 2 things. We don't talk to each other sometimes about these struggles. And then the second thing is, even if we do, we don't talk to anyone else. We keep it to ourselves. We share it around the dinner table, and it doesn't go any further than that. And that is the problem. I always say, like, I'm going to tell everyone how old I'm 38 years old. I went through the school system. I know the battles that my
Me
parents
too.
had to
Mm-hmm.
fight, right? And these
Mm-hmm.
same battles are the same battles that I'm going to the school now to fight with my son. And it's been 30
Yes.
years. 30 years and nothing has 30 years and nothing has changed. And I always say, my parents were immigrants. They did the best they could, but they fought alone.
Yes.
They were on their own.
Yes.
But we don't have to be like that. Like, we have access now, like we have internet, and we're able to kind of connect to each other. And I feel that as a group, as an entity, it's really important for Black people to tell their stories and to connect with each other and to work with each other, because that's the only way I think change is going to happen. So I'm really appreciative that you did what you did, that you stood up, that you're out in front, and now that you're running as a school trustee to make change. I think this is what needs to happen. And I would say to any Black parent that's listening, I mean, sometimes I went into my kid's school and there's another Black family in the class, but they won't make eye contact with me, right? And it's like, well, like, your kid's a Black kid in the same school, in the same class. Let's connect, because who knows what they're going
Yeah.
through and what I'm going through. And maybe we can talk to each other. And even if we're not, like, maybe we can support each other, right? Like, there's no need for this kind of division. I think that it's like this colonized mentality, right? Like divide and conquer. So I feel like this is the beginning of maybe changing that. And I think your story in particular is just, it's really powerful in making that transition. I guess one of the things I wanted to ask, and I think you've touched on it a little bit, is, do you think that Black parents really need to be equity experts in order for their kids to get through the school system?
I think, one of the reasons, like, it's like when a woman has been abused, or something happens, the victim gets embarrassed.
Yes.
So when you're in the school system and
Yes.
your child, you're called the N-word or something, they're discriminated against you. Why should I be embarrassed? And you did something to me. And I say that to my kids. I said, somebody hurts you. You shouldn't be embarrassed. They should be embarrassed.
Yes.
And the only way to stop that, when something happens to you, and parents, to be equity expert, you got to teach your kids from a very young age how to advocate and have a voice. The voice starts at home. When a child is speaking, let them know you are hearing them. So let your child know when a teacher, when anyone does anything to them, they have a right as a human being to call them on it. I say to my children, you do it respectfully, but you do it. You don't wait a day, you don't wait 2 days, you do it in the moment, privately, or if you want to, or use the same voice that's been taught to other kids who are not Black. Say to them, I'm sorry, what you just said to me hurt my feelings. This is how it makes me feel. It is wrong and I don't like it. Please don't do it again. If a teacher calls me and tells me my child says that, I'm saying he's right. My son once got in trouble, and I remember I said this to the principal. Like, a quick story. He was 10 years old, and a lunch monitor, I believe I think she was a teacher. Yes, she was monitoring their class, and one of the kids were running, and she pulled the kid by his hoodie and pulled him back. And my son caught my son goes, you can't do, you're choking him. And she went to demonstrate to my son how she was doing it. And he goes, even when you pull my hoodie, you're hurting me. And because she was embarrassed because he said it in front of the entire class, the principal called me to tell me about it. And I said, did you tell her to apologize to him? Because she did hurt him. If he says that, that's what happened. The next day she goes, you're right, whatever. The next day she went to apologize to my son. And in that apology, she said, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have done it, but he stopped her immediately and said, my mom says there's no but an apology. When you're wrong, you own it, and that's it.
Good for him.
Then they called me. And I said, I will never say this to my child in front of you, but I'll tell you this, he's right. Because when he does anything wrong, I tell him the first thing he has to do is take ownership, because that's how you learn and that's how you grow. If you're focusing on the but, you cannot learn. So I don't care how old she is. He needs to let her know that. And instead of calling me with something as silly as this, you need to speak to your people and educate them. I never got another silly phone call like that because it was silly.
Yeah.
And as parents, we need to let our children know how to do it, because you know what they use with our Black kids? They're aggressive. But when a white child does it, oh, they're articulate and they are showing leadership and they are well spoken.
And they're standing up for themselves.
Language that, yeah, and they're standing up for themselves. But when a Black child says it, they're disrespectful, they're aggressive. Why are they so angry? It's not passion, because their passion is viewed as anger. Why? And, it's one of the things my husband and I, we're so big on educating. It's one of the things that we hope the school board and all their training is these biases. I'm not saying all teachers, when they say this, I'll be the first to say, when a lot of teachers say these words towards our Black kids, they're not being racist. They're not, it's not who they are. It's that subconscious bias that has been passed down and that has been accepted over generation. And they get caught up in that.
Yeah.
It's a real big struggle. It is the reason why I'm running to be, even though the issue with my children brought me here, but I realized since my story, you know how many moms I've spoken to? Even white moms who have Black boys that they're raising their children. The Muslim community have suffered greatly under this system. You know what they say about themselves? We are the new Blacks. That in itself is so insulting. And it's so telling, which means they're aware of how Black students are treated, and now we're feeling that.
Someone said to me, your back is always up. I went to the school the other day, and someone said your back is always up. And I had to think about it for a little while. And I was like, you know what? Yeah. Like I go in expecting racism. I go expecting, discrimination against my son, because we had a hard year last year, grade 2. And I went in, my eyes were not open. I went in completely open, and the teacher would say things and I would be like, oh my God, I have to, like, she would say, first she said, he doesn't really show emotion and, he doesn't show his excitement about things. So, and I would go in going like, oh my God, maybe we should take him to see a therapist, like just totally on her side. Right. And thinking that there's something wrong with my child. And then it became, oh, now he's showing too much emotion. Or he has a scissors in his hand and that's aggressive and he's a danger to himself and others. And it became like the language that she was using. And it wasn't like his teacher was racist. I can't say that. She was a great teacher. She was really dedicated, but she had this like idea or these biases or this idea of who my son was. Like she would be like, oh, I'm connecting with him through sports because I know he loves sport. Like just these real kind of stereotypical things that just got away from us. And it was really hard to understand what was going on. And sometimes it's difficult to differentiate between legitimate concerns and whether or not there are biases or racism at play. And so, for example, this year, I was hoping to make it to the 6-week point without having a call, but I got a call from the principal last week. And she said, oh, it's nothing to worry about, but your son was walking and his pants fell down. And so I said, well, what do you mean his pants fell down? And so apparently he was walking and his pants fell down and the teacher sent him to the office. So my reaction was, well, if his pants fell down, like they must have been too big for him. And I remembered the pants he was wearing and I knew they were big, but I wasn't there that morning when he got dressed. And when I saw him the evening, I thought, oh, they must fit. Like he must be okay in them now. But the waist was too big. And so he said, Mommy, I was walking and my pants fell down a little bit. And the girl behind me said I did it on purpose, but I didn't do it on purpose. And I was really embarrassed that they fell down. And then I went, and then she told the teacher and the teacher said, go to the office. And I thought, he's 8 years old. I understand the climate that we're in. with the whole Me Too movement. And I understand that. But to me, like, it just seemed like such an escalation to say, okay, this 8-year-old's pants fell down. He
Of
needs to go to
course.
the office. And then the principal gleefully calls me and tells and I said to her, well, why was it escalate? Well, we do that for all kids, no matter who it is or what grade they're in, we do it for all children. If something like that happens, all kids get called to the office, and I deal with that for all kids, like really emphasizing that all, right? And so I dealt with it. I spoke with the teacher. She explained she didn't feel comfortable dealing with the situation. And I thought, okay, it's fine. Like the term just started. We're at a heightened sense of awareness around body and those kind of issues. And I get that. I've taken measures so that my kid will no longer be wearing pants with a drawstring. He's going to be wearing pants with buttons from now on, right? So I've taken those measures, but it's also really kind of hard because I think, well, if it was a white kid and that happened to them, I mean, would they have been sent to the office? I don't know. I honestly don't know. So you have these kind of situations sometimes, and it's really hard to figure out what exactly is going on here. And I think that's part of the reason why schools and people and teachers can turn around and be like, well, I didn't mean it that way.
So I have been there. When Ziphian is 7, he's in grade 12 now. So when he went to Juilliard, we used to get calls every week. It's draining on a parent. And I didn't understand the system. Like I said, my firstborn. So I didn't understand the system. But there's one thing that I understood and I knew, and it kept me. And this is what I would say to all parents. You've got to know your child.
Yes.
I will never let another person tell me about who my kid is. And that was our saving grace. I remember on a number of occasions, I would say, the child you described to me, I have never met. And I gave birth to him. You want me to believe that when I drop him off here in the morning, he just do a whole transformation and become this person because I don't know this person. And I said, does he do anything right? Because you failed to call me with good news, but you call with these negative. Think about the message you're sending to that child, the subliminal message that you're sending to that child. A teacher should be equipped enough to know when something happens, what to call home with and what to not call home with.
Thank you. Yes.
A teacher, and it's one of the things someone asked me, a reporter asked me, and one of the union asked me, what are one of the things you're expecting to change? One of the things, one of the first things I would like to change when I go into this system, transparency and access to information. Every school will know that I'm responsible for, and their parents will know what to do when something happens and how to maneuver the system and what to expect. I have great admiration for teachers. Again, when I send my kid, I send my prized possession to you for umpteen hours a day. So I have respect for you. However, when you cross the line, you should be called on it. Sometimes those are teachable moments. Because when you look at, the situation with your son, to say the pants fell down, even if they didn't want to touch the child, he's old enough for them to say, pull up your shirt, let me see, pull up your pants, pull up your shirt, let me see how it is, like if it's big. But to send that child to the office, first of all, he's already embarrassed. And then you add to that and you send a message to others around. So when my son used to say, Mom, everything that happened, I get blamed for it. It's because the other student will see how every time he would get sent down and things will happen. I had a teacher told me once, and I didn't even understand it at the time when she said it. She said to me, it was in grade 5, and she goes, I picked Ziphian. And I said, what do you mean you picked him? She said, all the teachers were in the lunchroom talking, and all of them said, I don't want him.
Oh my God.
And I volunteered to be his teacher. I said, say what now? Because you hear that and you're like, what?
It's unbelievable.
And But that happens all the time. And when I said to you about, you got to know your child,
Mm-hmm.
in grade 6, they said to us, we believe he needs to be in special ed. So they had a meeting with us. Like, the thing is this, I laugh about it now because I remember the time they called me and I looked to my husband like, they really don't know who I am.
Mm-mm.
And they said, well, he has all these behavioral issues. Plus, he's only getting B's and C's in his mark. And maybe we think he should be tested. So they had 2 meetings with us. The first meeting was, and I said, let me be honest with you. The system is set up that says he's supposed to get A's and B's to go in certain profession. I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not that mom. She goes, what do you mean? I said, my husband and I are not that parent who tell our kids just to get A's. And we look for them to come home with A's and whatever. I don't promote this to them because I know the system that they're in. And if I want them to go to university is what they look for. But I'm not one that wants to see, I'm going to pass out if I don't see an A in my child report card. I said, the movers and shakers of this world don't always get A's and B's. Mm-hmm. I said, I know my child. He's the most intelligent human being I've ever met. He's articulate. He's a deep thinker. I know, because you already told me, Mom, I'm not getting a job where I'm going to sit behind a desk every day. That's not who he is. I said, you already told me he doesn't like it when he doesn't learn from you just speaking to him. That's not how he learns. I said, plus he's a boy and he'd rather be outside playing because he's bored. Mm-hmm. And I also know who he is. And at times he's being lazy. So I said, we're not going to do that to him. I said, he's fine. If you want to see him get it, I'll get him a tutor if that's the case. I said, first of all, he's in French immersion. All his math and science are in French and he's getting B's and C's. I'm okay with it. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't tell him that because I want him to do better, clearly, but it's in French. It's in another language that I don't even speak. Mm-hmm. I said, he's already way ahead of me. And I said, I'm not training my child to give resumes. He's going to be taking resumes. But I say that to say this because it was me. But I think of those mothers who didn't understand. And when they come because they come and the language that they use, it sounds very encouraging. Mm-hmm. And you get lost in the words that they use and you admit and submit your child to these stereotypes that they have. Later, I didn't know this. Like I said, my first. So later on, I found out it is a system thing that they have, that the school system have set up, where they push the Black kids into these special programs because the school gets funding. Mm. And when I realized, I thought, and it takes forever to take it off their transcript at school, their records. Mm-hmm. Yes, it stays on there. And I thought to myself, how damaging I would have damaged my child had I agreed to this 100%. Just for them to get more funding. Yeah. But I said, if I didn't know him, how would I would, oh my gosh. This is in grade 6.
Yeah. It's funny because, like I said, I have the same story. When I was in grade 3, when I was in grade 3, my mom was told I need to be in special education. I need to be in a special class. Mm-hmm. I mean, every Black parent, every Black person I speak to has this story. And it has not changed. So, yeah. I mean, it's sad. So
it is.
Do you see, I'm asking this question, but just by me talking to you, I already see hope. So, but I want to know do you see hope? Where's your hope come from?
Okay. So I see hope because of my children. And as much as I have these horrible experiences and I have these stories, they've also educated me and they've also helped me to grow. And when I look at the system through my kids' eyes, I'm very hopeful. In Ziphian's case at his high school, one of the things that kept me going, his experiences, his discrimination and systemic racism didn't come from students. It came from the adults that he was supposed to respect and was supposed to protect him. It was the students who called it out and says, we believe the guy that told us to go check on our stuff in the locker because if he might be in there stealing. we believe that was racist. Those were students who called that out. Those were students who came and told him and rally around him. So the next generation, whatever parenting they're having, whatever it's social media or whatever it is, I see them because that's the future. There is enough educators out there, and I could speak from experience. Because of what I just went through, I've had a number of people behind the scenes who cannot be seen publicly supporting me because of their jobs, telling me I was like a godsend because of stuff that they have been saying. I have heard teachers said, after we saw you on the news and the way you stood up for what was right, we stopped being afraid of losing our jobs and started saying we're going to call things out when we see it.
Good.
So when I get goosebumps right now when I speak of that, because it is those stories that gives me hope.
Yeah.
It is the people that are coming to help me campaign and saying, I know who you are. I saw what you did and we want to rally around you. I don't even live in your area. It is those stories that keeps me going, and I feel hopeful. I'm not saying I'm going to change everything, and I'm not saying it's not going to be a struggle and a fight, but I'm not going to be quiet. And I don't care if I'm standing alone, if I'm standing for what is right. I am okay with that. I've always been okay standing against the crowd for what is right. And I tell my kids, remember your experience. So when you see it, you call it because it's important.
That's so true.
So there's hope. There's hope. There's hope for your son, your 8-year-old, and my 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And I went to my son, my 8-year-old, he's grade 3. His teacher called us in, yesterday. We went to go meet with her, not for anything negative, but I already knew who she was based on what my son comes home and say when I say, how was your day? Cause I ask him every day, what happened? Tell me what happened. He goes, Mom, the same thing. She's calm. She's nice.
Mm-hmm.
And kids, you got to listen to your kids because they know, they pick up on these. It's like a sixth sense that they have.
Yes.
And when I went in to see her, just the way she spoke about my little guy and to us, I thought to myself, the confidence that that kid is having from what he's experiencing at home, and so far as grade 1, 2, and 3 teacher, how they have been with him, is giving him that much more confidence at school. And I find, or it happens to our boys a lot, if they lose confidence at school, they lose interest in school.
Yes, and they disengage.
And that's how
Mm-hmm.
and they yes. And that's why that's why I want to be a trustee. You have I want this because of that. And I've already told myself, I am not stopping because I feel like I cannot at this point, because even if the trustee is not where I'm supposed to be, I have to find a way to connect and stop it from kindergarten, because it starts in kindergarten.
It starts in kindergarten when they're isolating these Black kids, putting them on separate mats, and that's where it starts. And that story is so typical. It is so typical, right? And I think you're so right, like what you said about kids knowing. So I know, like last year, like I said to you, the teacher was, in theory, like a great teacher. She was so dedicated, but my son didn't want to go to school. And there was something, like he turned to her in class. I laugh now, but at one point he said to her, she called me because he turned to her and he said, she'd asked him to do something and he turned to her and he said, I'm not your slave. And I was like, oh my God, he said that? I don't know why he said that. Maybe it's because it's Black History. But then I was like, towards the end of the year, after we had gone through everything, I thought, he is not able to articulate exactly what's happening, but he can use that analogy. Like he understands that. So he can use that analogy to say to her, like, I'm feeling like you're not treating me right. But he can't articulate
they know.
Right? They know. And so it's interesting because even with me, like this year, so he has a different teacher. I don't know anything about her, but I've also had a meeting with her. And yes, we had the pants issue, but aside from that, just, the way the conversation was had, I feel a lot more confident. He seems to be a lot more confident and happy. So, we're hopeful. There's always hope. And I think one of the things I want to end this call reiterating is that I love teachers. Like, I think they do a job
Yes.
I could not do. I go on trips with the kids and I think, oh my God, I cannot do that. Like, how do they do it? So I have such respect and appreciation for people who can take these little unformed beings and shape them and teach them and be patient and love them, right? During the hours that they're there. I have a lot of respect for that. And I understand, but what I would like to say to teachers, I think, and I'd love to hear your opinion, is that, when a parent comes and we're talking about racism and anti-Black racism and systemic racism and equity and discrimination, like I understand that, given that, being that you feel like you're putting everything into your job, to hear that, it takes you back, right? And you get tense. And so I understand that, but I would say to teachers that you need to sit in the discomfort and listen to what parents are saying to you, Black parents are saying to you, so that you can learn and grow and be even better at your job, is what I would say. And I'd love to hear what you think about that.
I think it's a lot of times they don't know that they are even being biased. They don't know. It's just, like I said it earlier, it's unconscious bias. So when they hear some of the stories, they then take it personal and think, oh, you're saying that about me. No, your behavior is that. You might not realize that. I'm hoping that it becomes mandatory across the board, across the province, where teachers are given an opportunity, whether it's through town hall meetings, and sit with Black parents and hear some of the stuff that we go through. And when you say these things to our kids, how it affects them and affects the home. I remember because the notes were so negative, I used to come home. You know what I used to do? I used to parent by sticky notes. Every morning I used to put a sticky note in my son's lunch bag. And when you get to school, he would see it. I would just say, so remember, you are number one. Remember to be respectful. Remember to think about what you're going to say. Like different things, encouragement. And I didn't know it was really having an effect. It was just one of those things it was meant to be a reminder note to him, how to be. And I got to his parent teachers meeting. And when I went to his desk, he kept them all.
Oh my God.
I started crying on the spot. I still have them to this day in a Ziploc bag because I said it meant something to him to see. He was in grade 5 at the time. It meant, and I thought to myself, that means it's important for me to lift him up because he's being torn down so much at school. And teachers have to know this. And I mean, you said it, I've said it before. It is not all. Sometimes it's not deliberate, but it has happened. And for us that receive it, it's received differently. And I've been where you are to say a lot of things when they first happened, I didn't understand. And I still have a lot of guilt.
Yes.
About how I handle situation when my son used to tell me, even though everyone says, I wish you were my mom. Look what you have done for him. Yes, I did that these last few years, but I remember these primitive years when I should have done more. And I thought when the teacher said, I believe the teacher and not my child.
Yes. Yes.
And it haunts me. It haunts me. It's a guilt that will stay with me forever. And I hope I live long enough to correct it and make up for it. But I was that parent and I did do that. And to this day, my son has an experience that he says, Mom, I told you. She said, my son called his teacher racist one day, his grade 5 teacher. He said, you're being racist. But he said that. He goes, Mom, I didn't say she was. I told her the boy was being racist when he was blaming me for something I didn't do. And she took it as her. And I actually believed her because, again, I thought she really liked my child, which I'm not saying that she didn't because I really think she did. But in that moment, I believed her and not him.
Mm.
And I'm like, see, if you can't say, for one, I think I was embarrassed.
Yes.
Just like when you said he said to her, like, I'm not your slave. So as soon as you said it, I remember that story.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I was kind of embarrassed. I wasn't as equipped. I didn't know I didn't know it was a systemic thing. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And I could admit that.
Yeah. But we're all, I mean,
But
we can't be too hard on ourselves, right? We're all learning. This parenting thing it's new, and we're all learning. And
of course.
I'm going to quote Oprah, like, when you know better, you do better, right? And that's exactly what you're doing. And
Yeah.
I think as a Black mom of 2 Black kids in the system, I am so appreciative of what you're doing. So I thank you for that.
If you enjoy listening to the show, be sure to subscribe so you get automatic updates of new episodes every Tuesday. Don't forget to follow Woke Mommy Chatter on Twitter at @WokeMommy, on Instagram, and follow along on Facebook at Woke Mommy Chatter. If you'd like to get in touch, have feedback, ideas for the show, drop me a line at wokemommychatter@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening to Woke Mommy Chatter.